Our next speaker is going to talk to us about something we all could use help with, I'm sure, and that is how to be better leaders. Betsy Meyers is the founding director of the Center for Women in Business at Bentley University and author of the new book, Take the Lead, Motivate, Inspire, and Bring Out the Best in Yourself and Everyone Around You. She brings a wealth of scholarship and experience to our discussion today. She is an entrepreneur, an academic, an executive, and a former Fed. During the Clinton administration, she was the president's senior advisor on women's issues and an associate deputy administrator at the Small Business Administration. She implemented, while there, she implemented the requirements for the Welfare to Work program. And Myers later held leadership roles in then Senator Barack Obama's first campaign for president. And as I understand it, after a grueling 2 years, she decided against position in the Obama administration, something about work-life balance. So, which is to say, she understands the pressures and the rewards of leadership in the federal government. Please welcome Betsy Meyers.
Good afternoon. It's so nice to be with all of you. I'm coming down with a tad of laryngitis, so bear with me. So I wanted to say thank you for the introduction. I loved my time working in government. I was here 6 years, and I came first, I worked at the Small Business Administration, where I ran the Office for Women Business Owners. Then I went to the White House and was President Clinton's, as my introduction said, was President Clinton's senior advisor on women, and we started a new office for women inside the White House, and then went back to the Small Business Administration in a senior role. And so I loved my time in government, and to all of you, as the Congressman said, the hard work that we do as government workers makes a huge difference in the world. But today we have 30 minutes, and I know you've been talked at a lot, so I'm going to share with you a little bit about my journey on this whole topic of leadership. And I wrote a book recently called Take the Lead, which I've been out talking about my book across the country, but my book is really my journey about this topic of leadership. All my life I've been curious about leadership. What is leadership? When does it work? When I worked for President Clinton in the White House, I used to watch in total fascination our cabinet secretaries. Why was it that a Bob Rubin would walk down the halls of the White House and people would almost bow in respect, or another cabinet secretary would not elicit near the same reaction? Why? But here's the thing, Bob Rubin got the work done. How many of you in this audience, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, would call yourself a leader? Thank you. That's so good. Most audiences, as I travel around the country, only half the audience raises their hands. And in the work of my leadership work, I say at the very least, you're leading your own life. But I would promise you that more than half of the people that work for you do not consider themselves a leader. And what we say is, at the very least, you're leading your own life. You decide where to show up, where you work, who you work for, how you dress, how you deal with conflict, how you deal with communication. And so it takes, I think sometimes in leadership, it takes some of the feeling of victimized out of it, because we are leading our own life, and it's something really important to remember. We also take these same leadership ideas to home. We're the same person. What we bring to the workplace and what we bring home is the same leadership qualities. So I've been traveling the country, and as my introduction said, I didn't chose after the Obama campaign. I was President Obama's chief operating officer in his 2008 campaign, and it was a 2-year journey. And at the end, I decided I have a little girl. She was 6 at the time, and I made the decision not to come back to Washington, but to step back into the leadership field. So I've been out writing my book and speaking a lot with corporate America, some government, some academia, and traveling the country. And I see 3 themes that I hear over and over again, which I think won't be new to any of you in this audience, that corporations and government is grappling with. Number 1, women. The workforce has changed. More women in the workplace than men. 58% of the graduates of college degrees and masters are women. And I think this statistic's fascinating from a global perspective. Only 17% of college graduates worldwide are white men. So what's happening in corporate America is the corporations are saying, wait a minute, the workforce has changed. And I love this Marshall Goldsmith title of his book, What Got Us Here Won't Get Us There. And what's really exciting is the CEOs that I'm working with out across the country are saying they don't have to be convinced anymore that we should have more women in high ranks. Only 12 to 15% of the top jobs in corporate America are held by women. The corporations like Price Waterhouse and Farmers Insurance and Ernst & Young, their CEOs, cutting-edge men, are saying we need to have strategies to make sure that we don't arrive in 2017 and 2020 with a mostly white male workforce. So I have this position at Bentley University in Massachusetts, a new center on women in business. We are working with corporate America to be the place for best practices. What's exciting, because 15 years ago I was here with President Clinton, is we don't have to convince as much that the conversation has changed to one of how to, not that it matters, but how do we do it? The second issue, young people, millennials. The congressman addressed it. How do we get young people, particularly into government, as corporations? How do we keep them? That's a whole other issue, and we could spend an hour talking about that. The third issue, and the one I have most passion about, is this issue of engagement. Not only government, but corporate America is dealing with, and these numbers are staggering, 50 to 70% of American workers are disengaged in the workplace. And some studies say as high as 90. 20% of American workers are actively disengaged. So I promise you, if you look just statistically, whoever works for you, 50% of your workers are not engaged. What do you do about it? Poor leadership makes for unhappy workers. What's the number one reason why people are unhappy in the workplace? Yes, their relationship with their immediate supervisor. You've heard this term. People don't leave a government agency or a company, they leave a supervisor. Last year, in 2011, 84% of American workers were looking for another job. And if you're disengaged, you're doing it on your time. So that's what I've been fascinated about. And the work of my book, which is interesting because when Simon & Schuster bought my book, most authors, and I had never, this was my first foray into writing, an author will come and say, here's what I want to write my book on. But Simon & Schuster said, Betsy, what do you think about leadership? You've been in some interesting places. Take us on your journey of what you think. And so part of writing my book was for me to step back and say, well, where did it work? When did it work? How did it work? And what was happening? So I want to share with you today my 3 beliefs about leadership and what I've learned from, and I will tell you all, from my stints in business, government, and academia, all of our lessons are learned, right, when we skin our knees. The mistakes we make us better. And so my book and my leadership work is really about, the times that I skinned my knees or someone else skinned their knees, but we got back up. The first belief is about leadership is about rigorous self-knowledge. Warren Bennis, who I believe is the guru of leadership in this country, he just turned 87. He's written 30 books. And if you have not read his book on becoming a leader, it's a Bible of leadership, On Becoming a Leader by Warren Bennis. But 25 years ago, in an academic setting, Warren Bennis was the first one to say leadership is about self-knowledge. Who are you? And what is the pearl of wisdom that you should add to the world? And one of the things we talk about in self-knowledge is this word we use, and you hear authenticity. What does authenticity mean? Well, there's been 1,000 academic studies done on this topic of leadership. If we just could find the 5 or 7 things that make a great leader, and then if we all followed that, we could be a great leader. But what the research has shown is there are no 5 or 7 things, because leadership is about you. It's about when you step into who you really are. You know, because when you think about this word leadership, you know, when I was talking earlier, it conjures up, like the word authenticity, it conjures up all these things. But leadership is really just about getting the results, right? It's just getting the work done. Whether you're starting a new initiative in your government agency, or you're trying to get legislation done, or you're trying to raise a healthy child, or you're trying to get reelected, that's getting the work done. And then part of that, getting the work done, is being an authentic person and understanding what the pearl of wisdom is that I add to the world. So I just want to share a quick story. I have one daughter, and her name's Madison, and she, from the very time she could talk, she always said to me, "Mommy, I'm not like you. I have gentle feelings." And so I said the universe always gives us what we need, right? And the other time when I picked her up from preschool, she was about 4, she said, "Mommy, please don't overschedule me. I don't want to go to violin, I don't want to go to soccer, I don't want to go to swimming, I just want to hang out with you and Daddy." So I said, "Okay, Maddie, but if you find something that you love in your life." So when she was 6, she discovered dance, and we went to her girlfriend's dance recital, which she just had her recital last night. And it wasn't surprising because she was always dancing somewhere in the house. And she said, this is what I want to do. So she has been dancing for the last 4 years. But we went to when she was 6, about 6.5, we went to get her leotard and her tutu and her shoes and in this ballet store. And she put on her outfit in the dressing room, and here's this little 6-year-old, you know, with the whole garb on, looking at herself in the mirror. And she's beaming, and she turns to me and she goes, "Mommy, I'm freaking out with joy. Like, I was born to dance." And the reason I tell you that story is because you're supposed to be freaking out with joy in your life. And as children have this childlike way of looking at the world and discovering who they are. And somehow we end up getting to adulthood, and we've been in these jobs a long time, and we're bored, and we've lost our freaking out with joy. And our job as leaders is to not only remind ourselves that we should be freaking out with joy, but helping the people around you who work for you to freak out with joy. You all know, and women particularly, but men too, we all know when we put on that sweater and it's a little tight and it has a little hole under the arm, and maybe we don't really like the color anymore, and we might wear it anyway, but we know that it doesn't feel right. And so part of that, are you in the right place? Are you in the right agency? Are you in the right job? Or are you in the right place but you need to adjust your attitude? Right? And these are the things as leaders with a self-knowledge that we need to think about. My friend Rebecca Shambaugh wrote a book called "It's Not About the Glass Ceiling, It's About the Sticky Floor." And what that means is it's a book for women, but I'd say it's for men too. Yes, there's still somewhat of a glass ceiling, but you have to ask yourself, what are the behaviors that I am doing that keep my feet stuck to the floor? Every one of us has a sticky floor, man or woman, and part of your leadership is to understand what your sticky floor is. Yesterday in the New York Times, Paul Mickelson, in the sports section, I'm sure some of you saw it, talking about his life philosophy. What he talked about was he's made $66 million as golfer, that he figures out what he's not good at, his sticky floor, whatever shot it is, and then he turns whatever that weakness is, he works at it and turns it into a strength. That's what we're talking about. Everyone has a sticky floor. I have a sticky floor. So when I worked in the White House, one of my issues, and we all have them, is I get so excited about what I'm doing, I sometimes forget to manage up. And so I found myself in the White House. I got a call from the Deputy Chief of Staff. Her name is Evelyn Lieberman, first woman, who called me in her office and said, she basically said, "Mrs. Clinton is mad at you. She's not happy with you." Now, we all know you do not want Hillary Clinton to be mad at you, especially when you worked in the Clinton White House. I said, "Oh my God." She said, "Well, Betsy, she was at a couple places this past week, and she got broadsided on things your office had been doing she didn't know about." I was on the president's senior staff, but obviously, Mrs. Clinton had a lot to do, Hillary had a lot to do with our office being developed, and she was a stakeholder in our office, and I realized at that moment that I needed to clean that up. So I did, and I went to her team, her chief of staff and deputy chief of staff, to figure out what we needed to do to make sure we had those meetings and information flowing, and then I called Hillary and apologized and worked through it. So, we all have those things that happen to us. The other sticky floor I had one day, you all remember Rahm Emanuel? He was my colleague in the White House, and in the morning meetings in the White House, they still have them. The senior team gets together with the chief of staff, and everyone kind of goes around the room. They have hot button issues on their agenda. And so one day, I'd been at the White House about 4 months, and Rahm pulled me aside and said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Of course." And he said, "Can I share something with you?" And I said, "Of course." He said, "We don't hear a word you say in the morning meetings." And I said, "What?" He said, "You sound like you're one of the advocates from the outside pushing in instead of on the president's staff pushing up." And it really was a simple framing of language, but just how I presented myself and the information in the morning meeting. And what's interesting is I shared this a couple years ago. Rahm and I had lunch, and I shared this with him. "Do you remember when you told me this?" He didn't even remember. So sometimes we say something to someone. Now, he did not say it in as nice a language as I just presented to you. Those of you know Rahm. But he didn't remember, but it changed my life as far as how do we frame things? How do we present stuff? Are the people that I'm talking to, can they hear me? Right? These are the things I'm talking about that takes about the self-knowledge, stepping back and how effective am I? How do I deal with change? How do I deal with communication? How do I deal with communication? How do I tell my staff something? Do I do an email or do I do personal relationship? Every one of us has to step back and take a look at these issues. Second, belief. We've always had this idea that leaders have all the answers. But in today's world, leaders can't possibly have all the answers. Leadership today are those leaders that are willing to ask the question. Willing to ask the question. It's a different way to think about it. So, here's a great story. I just heard this story a couple months ago. A woman took over a private high school in Manhattan that had been fraught with leadership issues. She took over the school and she turned it around. And she was asked how she did it. And she said, "I came in, I met with every faculty, administrator, and member of the PTO, and I asked 2 questions. 1, what can I do to make your life better? And 2, what are your suggestions to make this school the best place ever?" She turned the school around on that. Now, here's the thing. You don't just ask those questions once, right? We think, oh, we've asked those questions, so great. No, she continued to ask those questions. It's an interesting thing. When you work in government, people are motivated differently. You can't give huge bonuses. It's those aspects where people feel like, oh, you care what I think. I asked my assistant, my new assistant at Bentley, when I joined, she's in her early 60s, I said, "Dee, what can I do to make your life better?" She started to cry. In her whole career, no one has ever asked her how her boss or anyone had never asked her how they could make her life better. So when you think about asking these questions and you think, oh, how do we make time for it in our schedule? Right? These are the things you have to make time for. All the answers that you ever want to have are right there with your people. So when I was COO of the Obama campaign, you can imagine in 2007, when any campaign, they go up so fast, and all of a sudden you go from 50 people to 400 people in the headquarters in Chicago. I'm the chief operating officer. How do I keep a pulse on what's going on in the operations? So I started something very easy. You could all do this in your departments. Once a week, I had breakfast with one person from each department. There was 10 departments in a campaign. One person, it was random. And a lot of them didn't know each other or had heard of each other or knew a couple people. And we went around that room. It took an hour, maybe an hour and a half, once a week. And we went around the room and first question, why are you here? Why are you here at the Obama campaign? What made you want to come be part of this? You could ask, why are you here at the Department of Transportation? You know, what gets you to come here every day? What do you love about the difference we're making in the world? And you can't imagine, those stories are very heart-wrenching. And 2, what are we doing right in the Obama operations? And 3, what are we doing wrong? Sometimes what you will get, after 3 or 4 of those breakfasts, you start hearing the same thing. And this is just a quick example, but one of the things that came up was that we were very frugal campaign, and they're very frugal this time around too. So we did not pay for staff to take a taxi to the O'Hare Airport if they could take the L for $2. $50 versus $2, right? Not even a question. But what came up with those breakfasts was, well, when we travel late at night or early in the morning, sometimes we don't feel safe. And at that moment, after hearing it 3 weeks in a row, we changed the policy that anybody who didn't feel safe or had early or late, absolutely the campaign would pay for a taxi. And then we implemented that. And those little things that you hear from those roundtables. Erskine Bowles, one of my mentors here in government, who was the head of the Small Business Administration and then went to the White House as Deputy Chief of Staff and Chief of Staff. One of the things I learned from Erskine Bowles was he came in here to government, being a businessman, all of a sudden you're head of the SBA, and you're set to lay out the strategic plan for the agency. But what did Erskine do? How did he set that strategic plan? It seems so simple. He went around the country and he held 10 town halls with business owners, and he asked them what they needed. What do you need, and how can we help you? And he came back with 2 things, because after 10 town halls, you kind of get the same feedback. 2 things. 1, access to capital. And 2, too much paperwork on the loans. And those were the 2 things that Erskine Bowles did. And every one of us in the agency was very clear about what our role was. Our role was to get, no matter where you were, I was running the women's office, I was clear that my job was to get access to capital women business owners. And the final thought on this issue is, do you know, everyone in the chairs out there today, do you know what success looks like in your life, in your job? Do you know? One of the reasons Barack Obama won, is our president today, and I'll tell you this, is because of the focus that we did. We knew what success looked like. What success looked like for 2007? Well, let me take you back for a second. Early 07, it just seems so far away, a long time ago, but early 2007, when I joined the campaign, he had less than 10% name recognition. Not a single endorsement from a congressperson or member of Congress or advocacy group. He had a funny name, and he was black. And all the polls showed us 30 points behind. And he went on 2 years later to become the president. And the takeaways, right, the takeaway from that is how. Yes, he ran a good campaign and all that, but here's the thing I want to share with you. And it was my aha, too. The reason I believe, one of the reasons, and there's a handful, that he became the president was the way we focused our time in 2007. We all agreed on one thing. If we won Iowa, we were in the game. If we lost Iowa, we were done. So everything we did in 2007, our campaign manager, David Plouffe, what are you doing today to help us win Iowa? And you can imagine, and you all know this, there's so much stuff swirling around, right? We get caught in so many directions in our lives. We put a lot of money there. We opened 40, 50 offices. No campaign had ever done more than 12 offices. We put 250 organizers. And there's 99 counties in Iowa, and Barack went to every one of those counties. So we focused, right, on Iowa. And on January 3rd, 2008, Barack Obama won Iowa with 9 points. And the reason I tell you this is that focus. Now you can imagine in 2007, all the donors and people that were telling us he should go here and speak there. He should go talk to this group over there. But it was the leadership of Pluff and the campaign that said, what does this have to do with winning Iowa? So I ask all of you, do you know what your Iowa is? Do you know? And do your people know? When I have interviewed leaders across the country about the #1 reason people have failed under their leadership, do you know what the answer is? They weren't clear. My team or this person was not clear about what their job was. We have so many competing, and in government, there's so many things coming at our teams. Your job as a leader is to help your team focus on their Iowa so they don't get lost in stuff that divert you from the mission. All right, my final and third point, which is really the passion for my work, the different way to think about leadership. What I'm saying is that leadership creates a feeling. And some of the men are going, oh God, feelings. But leadership creates a feeling because what are we? We're humans. And what drives our behavior is our feelings. And when we feel valued, when we feel appreciated, when we feel heard, included, we do our best work, we're our most productive. So if you wouldn't mind, if everyone would close their eyes, this will just take 10 seconds, close your eyes, and I want you to think a time in your life when you were most productive, most proud of the contribution you were giving to an organization or a team, most excited to get out of bed in the morning. Was that also not a time when you felt valued, you felt included, you felt heard, you felt understood, you felt acknowledged? Okay, open your eyes. For me, the most valued I ever felt was working for President Bill Clinton. Why? And he really helped me come to this conclusion, actually. Why? Because no one was invisible to him. So I love a story, almost 3 summers ago now. Do you remember when President Clinton went over to North Korea to get the 2 journalists? And it was really great. You know, there he was coming down the airplane, and it's like, oh, so great to see him again. But here's the story behind the story. So at that dinner that Kim Jong-il, who recently passed away, threw a big dinner in honor of the president, Kim Jong-il said to Bill Clinton, you know, I've always wanted to meet you, and I have such respect for you. Because, you know, he said to President Obama, I won't release the journalists unless you send Bill Clinton. Why, right? Well, so what he told him at that dinner, and President Clinton didn't even know this, he said, in 1994, when you were president and I lost my father, you sent a letter of condolence that arrived to me before I'd ever even heard from my allies. Who would have thought that a simple gesture of human decency would have solved an international diplomacy crisis 15 years later? So you say, well, how does that translate to every day? The thing that made Bill Clinton different, and I always say it's his reservoir of goodwill, and every leader, no matter how you feel about any leader, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, our good and bad, right? Our best qualities sometimes are our worst quality. But the thing that Bill Clinton had and that has sustained him through the good and bad times is what I call our reservoir of goodwill, that we all have one. And when our reservoir is high of goodwill, my daughter calls it our stars in your bucket, right? When you're putting a lot of stars in people's buckets, and those stars are when you say thank you, when you acknowledge someone, when your stars are, your bucket is full, people like you, they want to work with you. So with Bill Clinton, one of the things, he's amazing, and I always say, the President of the United States, who's the busiest person on the planet, can take the time to notice his team, to say thank you, we can do it. So one of the things that he was famous for on his team is he noticed the work that we did. So as one example, I had done an event with him where we brought 25 women leaders from around the country. He did a 2-hour meeting, and it was issues everything from small business to domestic violence. And he sat with these leaders for 2 hours. Went really well. And 2 days later, I ran into him, just in passing, in the West Wing. And he stopped me and he said, Betsy, hey, I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed the meeting a couple days back and how much work I know you did getting them all there. And it was so interesting. I really appreciated what Hetty Ratner said, who's such an expert in small business. And I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. Now, do you think when you get something like that from your boss, whether it's the President of the United States or head of an agency or head of your team, that you don't walk down the hall with a little skip in your step, right? And I always say you can live 2 months on one compliment. Here's the thing. In order to do this, you have to get out from your desk. We spend all of our time today, and I don't care what environment it is, and I travel all over talking to groups like this. Corporations, government, academia. You walk through those buildings. I go into any federal government right now agency and walk through the floors, and what are people doing? Sitting in front of their computers. In order to do this, you have to get up, and what leaders I've talked to say, it's walk your floors. Talk to your people. For everything the computer has brought us and technology has brought us, which is a lot, what it has taken from us is the human interaction, the human dynamic. People are motivated by relationships. Everything you get done in your life will be because of the relationships of the people around you that work with you. And in order to do it, you have to get off the computer. And I even say, like, don't even have your computer at your desk. Don't even have a desk, right? Why do we have desks? I have this new office at Bentley, and I'm trying something new. Because what happens is, let me tell you your day. I'm almost done, but I have to tell you, this is a typical day of the typical American, and then we wonder why we are not happy. We go to our office with our cup of coffee. It's 8:30 in the morning. We sit down in front of our computer because we got to check the emails. We get into the emails, pull our head up 2 hours later. Oh my God, how did it get to be 11:30? And I just answered 40 emails that have nothing to do with my Iowa. Now I got pulled into a meeting. Now it's 12:30. Oh my gosh, I'm hungry. Grab a couple buds, go to lunch. Now it's 2. Oh, it's got to get back to the computer, get in front of my computer, get lost again. Pull my head up, it's 4:30. How did that happen? I did not do one thing today to take me to success of my day. And you do that day after day after day, and you know what? You're not feeling so good about yourself. Part of the examples that I gave you about Iowa and about Erskine Bowles' access to capital, in those jobs, I was clear about where to spend my time, and it wasn't sitting behind my computer answering emails. It was out there with the people trying to figure out how to get the work done. And our job as leaders is to not only get ourselves to get out of our desks and walk our floors, but to help our people do it. And it seems so simple. Everything I'm talking about here is not unearthing the great secret underneath the tomb of Egypt. This is about everyday human decency, about what motivates your people and what excites them. I'm going to close with one final story. We've talked all business today, but I mean all government, but I want to just share with you one business example which is totally translatable. Southwest Airlines. Because I just want to end by saying, what is leadership? Leadership is about getting the work done, getting results. And obviously in business, it's about making profit. But Southwest Airlines is the most profitable airline in the country. Why? They talk about love. And people say, oh, you can't talk about love in the workplace? Or, oh my God, certainly don't bring it to government. Love. Well, let me tell you, Southwest is all about love. Their employee newsletter, Love Lines. You walk into their headquarters. Has anyone in this room been to Southwest headquarters? Yes. You know how you walk in their halls? Okay, you walk down their halls, and they have their pictures of their employees on the walls. So they've got like one wall for wedding photos and one wall for kid photos and sport photos and dog photos and cat photos. They have one full-time person that does nothing but collect photos and frame them. Then they have a people department. But this people department does couple things, but one of the things they do is they track their 30,000 employees to track them, well, who's getting married and who's having babies and grandkids or whatever, and then, but also when something sad is happening. And when they find out something is sad, they wrap them in a warm blanket of love. So about a year ago, or 2 years ago, there was one of their middle managers whose wife was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And the prognosis wasn't good. The doctors gave her maybe 2 years max. So the people department called him and said, was there anything, first of all, how are you and how can we support you? And 2, was there anything you and your wife had been planning to do and you hadn't gotten to it yet? He said, yes, we were planning a 20-year wedding anniversary to Italy and we hadn't saved enough money. So they took up a collection across Southwest and they raised $10,000 for this couple and they sent them to Italy. And you might sit there and say, you know what, that is really nice. Yeah, it's really nice, but you know what else? That employee's never leaving Southwest. And anyone who hears that story, you go, wow, I'm going to fly Southwest. But more importantly, do you know what their engagement rate is? 97% of their employees say they're engaged and they'll go the extra mile for their company. How many of your people that work for you will go the extra mile for you or your agency? 97, and oh, by the way, they're the most profitable airline. And when the downturn happened, only airline that didn't lay off people. And they're all about love. So that's the trend. That's what's happening in the world of leadership. And what companies are looking at is about how do you create an environment where people feel valued and included and appreciated and heard. And it starts with you as a leader, not only yourself, but the team around you. And so what I just leave with you all is to lead with love and have a good time with it. And as the congressman said, what you're doing is such an important work. And it's great to have days like this, you know, where you have time to kind of sit back and reflect. But it's been great being with you, and I wish you all the best in your future. Thank you.